Alright, so as you can see, the sheaths have come out of the oven now, and they're actually good and dry, and like I said, they will maintain their form very well. Now, the next step is I'm going to mark the holes, or I've already done this off camera, but the next step is you're going to want to mark your holes for your snap here. And how I do this is I actually take my knife and I will put it inside the sheath, and then I will just kind of eyeball whereabouts I want my snap, like so. It can be a pain in the butt because they can fall off just like that. Yeah, look who's talking. You drop an M&M. Ha 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 ha.
You're telling me I drop the M&M.
Yes. But anyway, as you can see, just kind of eyeball it, and then you're just going to mark it with your awl, and then you can go back and punch your hole with one of them. I'm not actually going to set my snaps at this point. I'm just simply going to mark my holes. You see, I didn't actually put that in there. I just snapped it, or put the hole in it, put the snap in just to see if it would line up correctly. Alright, so now let's go ahead and cut out the welt. Now, for anybody that doesn't quite understand what the welt is a piece that is going to fit right in between the two layers and make a third layer. And it's what that's for is when you run your blade in and out of your sheath, you want to make sure that your blade isn't going to sever your stitching. So the welt actually keeps that from happening. Now there's several ways to make a welt, but this is how I do it. All I'm going to do is I'm going to get a scrap piece of leather. Okay? I'm going to take my sheath and I'm going to lay my sheath on the scrap piece of leather. And then I'm going to trace around the outside edge, just like that. Now, if you remember, I extended, when I made the template for this, I actually extended it down 3/4 of an inch. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to do it in reverse. Instead of extending this 3/4 of an inch, I'm actually going to come up from this 3/4 of an inch and make little marks all along it. Then I'm just simply going to connect the lines. That's going to be my welt. Alright, now you can see that after you cut this out, you're going to be left with a little bit of pen marks or pencil marks or whatever it is. that's fine. This is going on the inside of your sheath and is going to be glued and stitched in place, so that stuff is never going to be seen. You do not want to take an edge beveler or anything else to this thing, because when you stick this welt in here, you want it to sit nice and smooth. Okay, you don't want, if you was to put an edge beveler on that, it just would not sit in there nice and flush. Now, you'll also notice that I put a number 1 on that, and I've also got a number 1 on the inside of that sheath. That's just simply because I'm making multiple sheaths at a time. I obviously wouldn't worry about doing that if I was just making one sheath. You'll also see that I snipped that corner off. Let me show you why I did that. Basically, when I put all this together and I go and I stick my knife in here, this part here, I want that part to be able to sit down into the sheath. So I snip that corner so that way when I stick my knife in the sheath, it actually has a place to go into now. Alright, so we have all of our stuff cut out now. We have everything water formed. We're ready to start dyeing. Now, like I said in an earlier video, leather dye, just like with everything else in leather work, is expensive. You're looking at spending almost a $10 bill just on this 4 ounces of the professional dark brown leather dye. Now, you can get the cheaper stuff, but I'm here to tell you the cheaper stuff does not look as nice. When you finish this and really oil your leather up and put a nice finish coat on it, it comes out very nice. I mean, you're going to get a nice dark, rich brown. The professional oil dye is definitely the way to go. Like I said, you can go cheaper, but you will not come out with that nice brown or dark brown rich finish. Alright, now a lot of your store-bought sheaths and everything, I've noticed that a lot of those sheaths, they do not dye the inside. And I'll tell you what, to me that's just tacky. If you're going to make a sheath, go all out. I mean, the last thing you want is you don't want somebody to look down it and see undyed leather or being dyed on the top side and then further down it's not dyed. This is one of those areas where, I mean, really, I guess it is personal preference. If it's for you and you don't want to do it, then that's fine. But if you're going to make something like this for a gift or to sell, don't be cheap. Finish the sheath out. So I always like to start on the inside. And even though it's the inside of the sheath, I still go over it several times. I just want to make it look nice. I don't care if it costs me a few extra bucks on dye. I'm gonna do it. Now obviously I'm going to trim this retention strap at a later time, so there's really no point in putting any dye on that edge, as well as the edges here. That's all going to be sanded down at a later time, so I'm going to hold off on putting dye on that for the time being. Okay, so once I'm satisfied with the inside and the edges, now I'm going to work my way to the outside. Now this is the part where a lot of people will panic the first time they do it, because the first coat just, it's not going to look very good, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. And that's what I'm talking about. That first coat is not going to look good. This thing's going to take several coats. You want that oil, or excuse me, that dye to really work its way in there. So now when I go over it again, each time I go over to start to look better and better. Okay, so there you go. I'm going to let this dry now. Now when you go to let this dry, especially the sheath part, you actually want to hang it. Okay, you don't want to lay it down flat. If you lay it down flat, the underside, when you pull it up, it's going to be dried in such a way that it's darker in the middle and lighter on the edges, or vice versa. So if you actually hang it, pretend that my finger is, a hook or something, and hang it in the air just like that, it will dry evenly and it will look a lot nicer. Okay, the dye has dried now, and at this point it's going to be kind of a dull, have a little bit of a residue to it. It's not going to have that deep, nice finish yet. Don't panic, because that will come. So the next thing we want to do is we want to get that residue off the top. And a lot of people will use scrap bits of wool to do this. I'm just going to take a piece of paper towel that I've wadded up, and I'm just going to do this. And you can see that little bit that I've done, it's starting to take that residue off the top, and it's starting to shine up the leather a little bit. Now after you've knocked off that residue on both your sheath and all your straps, the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to burnish our edges. And we're basically, if you remember, we took that edge beveler, and you can see that edge right now. We've basically made it to where we can round that off and give it a finished look like this. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. All you're going to need for this, you do not need to get fancy. All I have is a bowl of water, a cheap little plastic burnishing tool, and a wool dauber. The straps are very easy. Now I'm going to show you a few little tricks with the sheath itself, and you can do these tricks with the straps as well, but the straps are just a lot easier than the actual sheath itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply a little water to our wool dauber, and you don't have to use a wool dauber neither. You can use a cotton ball, a cotton swab, a sponge, a towel, whatever you want. And we're just going to apply a little bit of water to our edge. And we're simply going to give it some nice friction. And you can see that it's taken that unfinished edge into a finished edge, just like that. Now you can see how plain and kind of ugly the ends are. But again, apply a little water to that edge. And now, it's not quite as ugly. It's nice and finished. Just repeat this process with all your straps. And like I said, I'll show you a little bit of a trick when it comes to the sheath. Alright, now for burnishing the sheath itself, I'm going to show you a little trick that I do to actually cheat just a little bit. When you get into these curves like this, it can be kind of difficult to really slick it real well. You can see that that's not going to really fit in there. So I've got another little slicker that I can use that will, but it's still kind of a pain in the butt to really work it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and then I'm actually going to chuck it right up into my drill. Now my drill is going to do all the work for me. Well, 90% of it anyway. Alright, so again, we're just going to wet the inside there. Now remember, where our welt is going to go, right here, 3/4 of an inch from the edge back, we do not want to burnish that yet. We only want to burnish this section here. If we do it here, it's just not going to look right at the end. As you can see, burnished that up pretty decently. Let's try it right there now. Alright, now that everything's good and burnished, I am going to apply this stuff right here to the edges, and it's just called edge knot, and basically is what it's going to do is extend the life of your edges. I mean, as you know, you run your belts through your straps and everything else, eventually it's going to start to fray and everything else, and this will just prevent that from happening as quickly. And it will also, I mean, this is a black coating. You can get it in clear and black, and it kind of gives it a little bit of contrast. And you can see, I'll take this piece here. It's been burnished, but it has not had the edge knot applied to it. And if I compare the two side by side, I don't know if you can quite see it or not. But you can see that that edge is just a lot darker than this one here. And all I'm going to do to apply this stuff is I'm just going to simply take a Q-tip, get a little bit on there, and just apply it to the edge. My kid is screaming about a corn dog in the background. I'm not entirely sure why, but either it's the greatest corn dog in the world or the worst corn dog in the world, I don't know. Kids these days. Alright, not only am I going to do that to my straps, but I'm also going to do it to my sheath as well. Any of the spots that I've burnished, I'm going to go ahead and apply this stuff. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to apply this right here. I am absolutely not going to try to pronounce that because I guarantee I'll butcher it. We're going to apply this to the flesh side of our leather. Here's an untreated type. Flip it over to the flesh side. See, it's light, untreated. And basically is what we're going to do is we're going to take it and we're going to treat it and seal it up just like this. A lot of people that work in leather, they might disagree with what I'm getting ready to do, and that's fine. This just goes hand in hand with what I've said a billion times, is sometimes things are just a little bit more personal preference than really anything. And I really think by doing this, it helps the look, it will help the wear of your leather, and overall I just think that it makes it look a lot nicer. So is what I'm going to do. So I'm actually going to remove one of my gloves. I'm going to take that off, apply a little bit. I'm just going to work it in with my finger here. Now, a lot of people do not believe in sealing up the flesh side like this simply because of moisture and allowing it to breathe. These are only the straps. I'm not as concerned about the straps breathing as I am the actual sheath. And I'll show you what differences or how I'm going to apply it to the sheath that's a little bit different than this strap. Alright, now here's one of the sheaths that I've already applied it to. Now you can see that I didn't apply it to the entire underside of this sheath. If water gets into this, I do want this to breathe a little bit. I do want that water to run out. So I do not want to treat the entire thing. I am, however, going to treat the top areas the areas where there's going to be a lot of rubbing and a lot of friction, because like I said, I just think that it will help maintain the quality of your sheath longer. And when that stuff dries, I mean, you can actually see that it actually gives it a very unique, nice finished look. And like I said, I just think that it prolongs the life of your straps. Okay, so now we've turned a corner and we're actually starting to assemble our sheath. I do apologize. I went ahead and put the snaps in off camera. Like I said earlier, I go outside and I use my anvil for this process. And I already know that this video is going to be fairly long, so I didn't want to extend it by dragging you guys along with me to set these snaps. If anybody has any questions on how to set these, just ask and I'd be more than happy to make a short video or take some detailed pictures, you know, or something along them lines. So like I said, I do apologize, but I don't want to make this video as unnecessarily as long as I have to. Alright, so now I'm going to start sewing, and I'm just going to sew this belt loop into place before I close this up permanently. I'm not going to show the stitch that I'm going to use on this part. I'll show you that stitch and how to do it when I do this section here. It'll be just a little bit easier to see. The one very important thing that I am going to point out now, though, is if you think that you have enough thread, get yourself more, because I'm here to tell you it will tick you off to no end when you think you have enough thread, start sewing, and you have to stop and start all over or put in a splice or something like that because you didn't pull off enough. It will make you want to do some very, very bad things to some inanimate objects, let me tell you. So let me go ahead and sew this belt loop up, and like I said, I will show you exactly what stitch to use when I get to this section here, and it's just a little bit easier to show you. Alright, so now we are going to go ahead and prepare for gluing the welt in place. Apologize for my kid in the background. She's watching Cinderella and having the time of her life, so you're probably going to hear her cheesing it up a little bit. But anyway, so what we're going to do is I'm actually going to set the welt on the inside, and then I'm going to, or I already have done this, but you're going to open it up and trace the outer edge of that welt on both sides, so that you're left with that pin mark right like that. Now, as what that is going to do for you is basically when you go to glue this thing, now you don't have to guess as far as how high up to put the glue, or or going too high or too low or anything like that. Now you know exactly how much glue and where to stop. Alright, now before you go gluing this on the welt, on the smooth side of the leather, go ahead and take a piece of sandpaper and scuff it up a little bit. Give your glue something basically to bond onto. So all we're going to do is we're just going to use good old-fashioned rubber cement, and we're going to go ahead and apply a thin layer. You don't want to get a whole lot of this stuff, just a nice thin layer. And this is where them pin marks really come in handy. We're going to do the exact same thing to the welt. Okay, now that we've got it applied to the first side of our sheath and the first side of the welt, we're just going to let that sit here and dry up a little bit. We're probably going to let it sit for a good 10 minutes or so. You want the rubber cement to set up in such a fashion that you can actually touch it with your finger and your finger isn't going to stick to the sheath. It's going to feel a little tacky, but it's not going to stick. And I'll show you exactly what I mean after this sets up for a little bit. Alright, now that we've let this sit for, like I said, about 10 minutes or so, when we touch it, we can actually hear it tacky, but my hand isn't just really sticking to it, and that's what we want. So now we're just going to take our welt, now this is a contact adhesive, so once you put it in place, it's kind of a mess to get back apart. So you want to set it in there right the first time. And then once you're certain that you have it in the place that you want it, go ahead and squeeze it down really good. Now I've seen a lot of people actually take a wooden mallet and actually kind of tamp it down. Never really found that necessary, but to each his own. And if it works for you, then by God, you do it. Alright, so now all I'm going to do is, after I let that sit for just about 30 minutes or so, I'm going to go back and I'm going to apply another thin layer here and a thin layer to this side here. I'm going to simply fold them over, and I'm actually going to take clamps and I'm going to clamp it in place. Now, before you go clamping your leather, your clamps will mark your leather. So get you a couple of scrap pieces, put one on each side, just like so. So now when you clamp it into place, it won't mark your leather. And there we go. Got it glued up. Now I'm going to walk away from these sheaths for no less than 24 hours. I want to make sure that the rubber cement is good and set up before I start putting my stitch holes in. Alright, the next step that you're going to want to take is you're going to want to actually sand your edges. Now, like I said before, I've let this the glue sit for, geez, I bet you I let it sit for about 30 hours. A lot of people will use a belt sander. I've never actually gotten around to getting a belt sander. I'm just simply going to use my Dremel tool. I've got it set up on a little Dremel workstation. So let's go ahead and sand this thing down. Alright, now before we get started, another thing I want to point out is please wear eye protection, because there is nothing more uncomfortable than having a piece of leather in your eye. And in case you hear any weirdness in the background, that is my kid playing with Ruby Princess, her stuffed animal. Now you know. And is what you're going to be left with is a nice even edge. Alright, so we've moved back inside now, and now that we have the edge all dressed up, now is when I'm going to go back and I'm actually going to put my stitch groove in, and then I'm going to also bevel my edges. Alright, now for the second stitch, I'm going to just kind of peek on the inside here and see where my welt goes, and we're going to adjust this edge beveler accordingly. Or excuse me, not edge beveler, but stitch groover. Open it up just a little bit more. touch more. Now, like I've said before, if you know that you're going to do this type of sheath on multiple occasions, you can rig yourself up a little jig to predetermine the distance from here to here, and then you don't have to kind of do what I'm doing right now. Okay, we got that second stitch groove marked. Now, I have not done the back side yet. There's been several times in the past when I've been working on a sheath and I've tried to mark both sides, and then when I go and I punch these holes, if they don't quite line up with the stitch groove when I go through the other side, it's just aggravating and frustrating. So I just don't do it anymore. A lot of guys will, put them on both sides and they line up perfect for them. More power to those guys, because I can do it, but man, after putting these many hours into this already, last thing I want to do is mess up. So now we're just going to bevel the edges. And now I'm going to go through and I'm going to mark where my holes are going to go. A lot of guys actually have a place or a little tool that they can use that just kind of rolls along and puts them in. I've never actually bought one. I've just always used one of these. Evenly spaces it just fine for me. And I'll just place it on there, press down, line up the next set, press down, and just work my way around. Alright, and for my next step, I'm simply just going to use those marks, and I am going to punch my hole at this point for my stitch marks, and I am just going to use my awl. And normally you're going to want to use a wooden mallet or a rubber mallet or something like that. I actually broke mine, so I'm just going to use a regular hammer. If you can get your hands on a rubber mallet or a wooden mallet, I would suggest using those. It's just gentler on your awl or your tool pieces or whatever it is that you're going to use for your sheaths. A lot of people also use a drill press, and I have the Dremel tool that I can use with the Dremel station, and I've used it before for my stitch marks. I just found that the exit marks of your drill, they just don't look as nice as your awl does. So I'm going to go ahead and just use my awl for this. Now you want to be careful. So if I flip it over to this side, see that hole right there? Kind of got off. Nothing ticks me off more than doing something like that. But that is the reality of working with leather, is you can screw up just like that. Now I could easily not show you that side, but like I said, that's the reality. Sometimes you mess up. Alright, so after we put our holes in it, you can see that all I've done is I've turned it around and I've put the stitch groove on the back side, basically connected the dots in a sense. And now all I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stitch this thing up. This is actually going to be the difficult part to show you on video, because I typically do this in my lap and not out here in front of me. My kid's playing dominoes, so pardon the noise. But so I'm going to actually have to try to hold this out here and show you. Now, like I've said before, it's very frustrating if you pull thread or if you don't have enough thread. A lot of people will say take the distance from here to the end and multiply that by 4. I actually multiply it by about 8. Yes, I have a lot of thread left over, but that's fine by me. I'll waste a little bit. I'd rather have way too much than just a hair too short, which I've done before, and that is just very frustrating. So, what I am going to do is I am actually going to start on this front side right here. And before I do that, the stitch that we're going to be using is just called a saddle stitch. It's a very strong stitch, but it's also a very easy stitch. And all I've done is ran my thread or my stitch right through the eye of my needle. On this side, you don't tie it off or anything, just run it through. And on the other end, I've put another needle. So now I have a needle on both ends of my stitch. So I am going to start up here at the top. Now, instead of starting, with the first hole, I am actually going to go back 3 or 4 places. And in this case, I'm going to go back 4, and we're going to run it through and pull your stitch even on both sides, so you have equal amount of stitch coming out this side and this side. Now is what we're going to do is we're going to choose a side, whether it be the entrance side of your holes or the exit side of your holes, and we're going to put it through. Now the same hole that we just came out of, we're going to go back through with the other needle. And sometimes they can be kind of a pain in the butt to pull. I just grab a multi-tool, pull it through. Now, you can see that we are left with 1 stitch. Now with each one of those stitches, give it a tug, make sure it's tight, and then we're just going to repeat that process. What happened, babe?
I'm trying
Well, keep practicing. Dominoes can be a very frustrating thing, I know.
Mama should need help. We have to come back in my box when Mommy gets back. When Mommy's back home, I'll make her help me.
Think so?
Yeah, I'll get her to help me.
As soon as Daddy finishes stitching this sheath, I'll help you, okay?
Okay. I'll come up so it doesn't make a very, so nobody trips over them.
Okay.
I'll come back in my box so nobody trips over them.
Alright, now at this point I know that it looks like we're going in reverse, which we are. We're actually putting a stitch in this way, and once we get to the end we're going to just turn around and we're going to go back this direction, doing the exact same thing all the way down to the end. We're going to double our stitching on these first 4 holes just so that it makes the stress point a lot stronger. Alright, now you can see that we've went all the way to the end and all the way back. And now, like I said, we're just going to continue doing the exact same stitch all the way to the end. And then after we reach the end, we're going to go back three holes or 4 holes, just like we did up front. Now, a lot of guys actually will set their sheaves in some sort of a clamp or other device to help them in this process, and it's actually a pretty good idea because as you can see, this is very time consuming. If you actually have something that will hold it in place so that way you can just zip through it, I mean, it's gonna make it a lot easier on you. I've just never gotten around to doing it. I've just always done it the slow, painful way. Okay, so we've worked our way all the way down, and just like the front, we're now going to reverse our direction and go back. Alright, so now that we've worked our way back 3 holes, we're going to go through one last time and put our stitch on the back side of our sheath. We're going to trim it off just a little bit. And we're just going to tie it off. Just a couple overhands will be just fine. Pull it tight. Trim it off where just a little bit is sticking out. Now I'm just going to simply singe those ends. Now we're going to do the exact same thing to that side there. Call it good. Alright, so we're all done with the stitch now, and all I've done is I just put my knife in there to ensure that it fits properly, and it fits very, very well. It's nice and snug, and couldn't be more pleased with the fit. Now, I know that, like I said, the sheath looks a little dull in color, and there's going to be some color differences and everything else, but when we're all said and done, it will all look nice and uniformed. Nice, deep, rich, dark brown. So bear with me. We will definitely achieve that look.